there is still no such thing as giving any religion a special pass in a truly secular society. And when Center for Inquiry had a Quranic criticism conference, University of California, Davis, in January 2007, and some students were protesting, I asked them, I said, are you feminists? They said, yes. I said, well, then you cannot. If you cannot be a feminist on the one hand and then try to shield the Quran from criticism on the other without puncturing your own gas tank.
Well, considering the amount of change that has occurred in my lifetime, 100 years doesn't sound too bad. That's essentially one person's lifetime. As a physician, I see a lot of 100-year-old patients. I work anywhere between Flint and Detroit, Michigan, on the southeast corner of Michigan, the third worst city in the world, or at least the country, versus the sixth worst city in the country. My concern with respect to what you're saying, and my alarming concern, is the amount of illiteracy. As far as education and as far as talking, as you propose to people, what I sense, what I feel, what I'm running across is a great barrier with respect that people don't read. In Detroit, the literacy rate among adults is 53%. I don't know the statistics in Flint, but they've got to be connected to the crime rate. Certainly, I would not be surprised if that correlates very well. And what I see when I go into people's homes, as I said, I do home care. Everyone has a television in every room. People, in general, from my perspective, from what I see, are getting their news and information from radio and television. Visual and hearing, they are not reading. Can you address this issue? I just seeing my little world is, because I understand that there's always been illiteracy, but I see it as an alarming growing numbers. And to what extent do you feel this is a barrier to accepting truth and reason and reality?
Well, I mean, certainly you have gotten to the root of much of society's anti-intellectualism. Certainly, people who are not imbued with a love of learning will not be open to questioning religious dogma. Because if you believe that you are operating under some divine absolute mandate, then there's no reason to have curiosity. There's no reason to thirst for further knowledge. There's no reason to yearn for a greater horizon, an expanded vista of knowledge and learning, because you have it all already. I think that perhaps the greatest embodiment of this powerful ignorance was when a guy named Watt in 1981 was at a Senate confirmation hearing to become Reagan's Interior Secretary, and he said we don't have to save the environment because Jesus is going to come and lift the saved off the earth anyway. So if you believe, as President Bush said to the Amish community in 2004, that God speaks through him. In fact, I would say that given how he expressed himself as a religious man, he just made a horrible insult to his God. But if he said that God speaks through him, and you noticed his lack of curiosity, you noticed that he ridiculed when people asked him if he was even self-reflective. And he even said, I don't think much about what I do or say. If you think you're a conduit for a higher power, the effort to learn and study becomes diminished. Certainly in large urban areas where there's poverty and illiteracy, that's a major problem. And I think the doctor raises another profound issue by implication, which is what do we do when those that fill the gap are the religionists? When the child in the inner city who can't read is taught to read by the religionist, who then, after they have basic reading skills, turns them to the Bible. Right now, we don't have the resources to have secular organizations do massive outreach to combat illiteracy. But certainly, I think that by helping public education generally, we can do this. But certainly right now, if local governments are overwhelmed with budget constraints and they cannot reach inner city kids, the first thing we have to do is to make sure that religious organizations are not legally permitted to piggyback on to government by faith-based assistance. Now, if on their own they want to go into impoverished communities, nobody can stop them. The problem is when there's government help. But certainly, the question of massive illiteracy, the power and money of religious organizations to intrude themselves into this situation and thereby convert the young people to religion that they help teach to read is one of the overwhelming problems we're facing. It's an absolutely realistic and profound point.
Hi, Eddie. I like to have discussions with Christians on a regular basis, and so, for instance, with regards to separation of church and state. So I wonder if you could help me be more prepared. I'd like to just kind of share what Christians I talk with say regarding the legal case for it, and then just get your reaction. Christians, of course, note that the Constitution actually doesn't have the phrase separation of church and state. The Constitution has the First Amendment, which says that Congress shall not establish a national religion. And these Christians note that courthouses had the Ten Commandments and so forth in them, and of course Congress has a chaplain that opens in prayer. So when the Constitution was written, these items were not regarded as violations of the separation, or violations of the Constitution, because they were present. And I understand the 14th Amendment grants the privileges granted in the Constitution. It says the states can't prohibit that. But a Christian would say that's true, but even still after the 14th Amendment was passed, people didn't regard the Ten Commandments in a courthouse as a violation of the Constitution. So they must not have understood it that way when it was passed. How do you react? How do you respond to that?
Well, you respond to it by textualism and by history. First is that you cannot interpret the First Amendment by how well it was practiced in the first few years after its enactment. Because right after its enactment, we had the sedition laws, where you could be punished for speaking against the president. Well, obviously, under the free speech clause, that would not be permitted. So that shows that society didn't understand the words, and you can't look at what was done subsequently in the immediate few years, because obviously the Sedition Act violated the free speech clause. Now, if you look at and if you email me, I'll give you my outline on the true meaning of separation of religion and government. It has all the arguments. But just briefly, the main architects of the First Amendment was James Madison with the input of Thomas Jefferson. And they had been working together to protect the equal rights of everyone. So, for instance, in 1821, in Jefferson's autobiography, he said that what he and Madison meant in the 1786 Virginia Bill for Religious Freedom was to protect not just Christians and not just religious people, but they delighted, in Jefferson's words, that they protected the equal rights of the infidel of every religion. And before drafting the First Amendment, Madison wrote to Jefferson saying that the people, if given the chance, would narrow the rights of conscience, and he was worried about the rights of infidels. So obviously, as the principal architect of the First Amendment, he was considering this. This was in his mind. But most importantly, the religious right-wingers on the Supreme Court say that the First Amendment only stops government from favoring one religion over others. It doesn't stop government from favoring religion collectively over non-belief. Well, on September 3rd, 1789, while deliberating what was to become the Establishment Clause, the Senate considered two proposed amendments that have done just that. No law establishing one sect over any other, no law establishing one denomination over any other, and both of them were rejected and never brought back. And the ultimate result, after the joint conference committee between the House and the Senate that Madison chaired, was to say no law, not no law establishing religion, no law even respecting an establishment of religion. So if the religious right are correct, those two proposed wordings on September 3rd of 1789, one of them would have been adopted. The fact that they were rejected shows that the founders wanted government neutrality. That's just a partial answer. There's much more.
Now you can appreciate the pride and the respect that I take in Eddie, and how grateful I am that I can call him a friend and that I've known him for many years. We want to bring him back to Michigan to speak again. It's his first time to speak at a Michigan Atheists State Convention. We also have a plaque for Eddie. Maybe we can move this way so that Tracy can get a photo in appreciation for participating with us today. But Eddie won't be hanging this in his church.
No.
Thank you.